Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HR Source, our forum on what has recently occurred at Starbucks in Philadelphia. Before I introduce the panel, the expert panel, I'd like to provide a little background and context for the events that we are talking about. Rashawn Nelson and Dante Young, black men who became best friends in the fourth grade, were taken in handcuffs from the Starbucks in Philadelphia at Rittenhouse Square, where Robinson had been a customer since he was 15. The video recorded on a white customer's cell phone galvanized people around the country and probably around the world who saw the exchange as an example of modern day racism. In the week since, the men have met with Starbucks CEO and have started pushing for lasting changes to ensure that what happened to them doesn't happen to anyone else. We were there for a reason, a real deal that we were working on, Robinson explained. We put a lot of time and energy and effort into it, and we were at a moment where we were about to have positive impact on a whole ladder of people, their lives and families. So I was like, no, you're not stopping that right now. Robinson said he thought about his loved ones and how the afternoon had taken such a terrible turn as he was taken to jail. Nelson wondered if he'd make it home alive. Anytime I'm encountered by cops, he said, I can honestly say it's a thought that runs through my mind. You never know what's going to happen. Although Thursday, Philadelphia Police Commissioner changed course, joining Starbucks in taking at least partial responsibility for what happened, Richard Ross struck a conciliatory note at a news conference saying, I fully acknowledge that I played a significant role in making the incident worse. Last weekend, Ross had said in a video statement that these officers did absolutely nothing wrong, and they were legally obligated to respond to Starbucks' report that the men were trespassing. But on Thursday, he said, I should have said that the officers acted within the scope of the law and not that they didn't do anything wrong. Nelson said that he had asked to use the restroom and that an employee informed him that it was only for paying customers. The manager called 911 to report that the men were not making a purchase and were refusing to leave. It reportedly took just 2 minutes from their arrival for her to call for help. Last weekend, Ross said officers had asked the men politely to leave 3 times because Starbucks said they were trespassing. After the men refused, Ross said the police made the arrest. It didn't really hit me what was going on, that it was real, until I'm being double locked and my hands are behind my back, Robinson told ABC News. And now let's get some response to that from a few perspectives that can help us understand what happened. We have Bill Shackelford, who is a recognized leader in multicultural human resources consulting, a publisher, author, as well as an expert forum contributor from the Workforce Diversity Network. He will use his 25 years of experience and his hands-on experience working with government agencies, Fortune 500 companies, and universities to help you resolve your workforce issues. Bill and I are colleagues at HR Resource and at the Inclusion Channel. Bill, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
And Mark, I have Terry here on the phone with me here.
Hi, Terry. Well, let's get you introduced as well. I'm so happy you were able to make it. Terry Burnaby has been litigating employment discrimination and civil rights for whistleblower cases for over 30 years. At Burnaby and Cabot, PLLC, Lynn handles employment and civil rights cases across the country. She's developed extensive trial and appellate experience in federal and local courts nationwide, and she received a BA degree from Harvard University and a JD degree from Harvard Law School. And we've got Terry, you say?
Terry, yes. Mm-hmm.
And Terry is vice president and co-owner of On-Site Olympic Supply. She has over 25 years of experience in project management, production, sales, marketing, and event planning. Her professional staff positions have included vice president of merchandising for two prestigious New York City design firms, as well as president of the New York City-based sales organization, which she co-founded. Okay, hi, Terry.
Terry, can you hear him?
Yes.
Hi there, welcome, and thank you for
I'm here.
persevering the technology challenges. We are happy to have you. So, Bill, what has happened here that after the better part of 40 years working on diversity and inclusion with organizations like Starbucks, which, by the way, you reminded me this morning has an excellent record. What happened here? How did this happen?
We've been working on this issue for quite a while. Unfortunately, we have not done the really hard work. Most of what we do is work around training. Training on the issues of unconscious bias, issues of diversity in general. The issues of the training will help you understand the issue, but it won't really change your attitudes and behaviors that underline your biases. That requires getting in the room with someone from yourself, talking about these issues, really having dialogue around it. And we have not gotten to the point where we're comfortable as a nation really having a really strong dialogue around diversity. So as long as we work on the surface, we'll have surface results. When we get to the point where we really start thinking about diversity as something that requires a change in behavior, and the behavior change requires us to really get to know one another a different way, we're going to continue to have these kinds of things happen, I think.
Bill, was this unconscious bias or was this overt bias? Or at the end of the day, given the impact that it had, does it matter or why would it?
The impact, as you know, is quite similar either way. In this case, I really think it was unconscious bias. The young lady, the server, has indicated that she feels embarrassed by the whole incident. She's not happy about her behavior in the incident and her involvement. She wants to talk to the two gentlemen to explain and apologize. I think she's learned a great lesson about unconscious bias from this incident. So yes, it was unconscious bias. It was nice to hear both the president of Starbucks and the chair of the board to very quickly respond to that question in the same way. When they were asked, was this unconscious bias? They both said yes. Was this profiling? Yes. So they very much own up to the fact that this is real. It was a real incident. They could do better. The server could have done better, and they will do better. But yeah, unconscious bias, I think, is a real good example of that here.
Bill, the last reading I had is that she had been terminated. Is that still true?
I heard that she was no longer there. I didn't hear whether she was terminated or whether she quit, but she was no longer employed.
Should there be zero tolerance, or do people get a chance to learn and see if they can apply their lessons?
Well, I know for a fact that I stood before a class doing a diversity training class for an organization, and I made a mistake, had a faux pas in front of them. And I asked for their forgiveness, and they gave it to me. We continued on. We're still all learning this issue of how to respond to issues of diversity. We have not gotten the education, the training we need, the interaction we need to get it right every time. I think it's a matter of understanding the motivation behind it. And in her case, I believe, personally, I would hire her tomorrow. I think she's the person least likely to do something like this again because she has learned a very strong lesson from personal experience of what unconscious bias is and how much it can impact others and how it makes you yourself look bad when it's exposed.
Okay. Hi, Terry.
Hello there.
Hi. I understand that you have a background in retail. Am I right? You actually are the owner of stores.
Correct. They're all in airports. And the issue was very interesting to me on both ends, just being having a retail operation and having, thousands of people coming in and out of your stores daily, as well as having two young men. I can't call them boys anymore, two young African-American men. So, I can kind of look at both perspectives.
Terry, what would you say to your employees, or how have you prepared them to deal with the reality of a global customer base?
We've been very fortunate because our employee makeup is very, very, very diverse. We try to address those issues by first hiring, a diverse group of people. And I think that alone just kind of handle some of the sensitivities in areas where we have not, and I'm in stores all over the country, in areas where we haven't had the luxury of having a diverse pool to choose from. Because we are African American owners, we have those conversations with our employees out front, and give them examples of experiences that we've had that have made us uncomfortable, and that we want to make sure that that does not filter or penetrate into our operations.
Question for both of you. Question for both of you. Thank you, Terry. Question for both of you, starting with Terry. Are you a parent?
Yes.
How old are your children and what gender?
I have a stepdaughter that's 32. I have a son that is 23 and another son that's 20.
Talk to me about your sons for a moment who are in their 20s, around the age of these two young men who were arrested. How did you feel as a mother? And what kinds of messages are you sending to your sons about where we are today in the country with race relations specifically?
Well, that's the accountability starts at the top. And I think that right now, unfortunately, the political climate that we're in, it's allowed some of these biases to surface. As an African-American mother raising two African-American young men, we started those conversations out very early. This whole incident made me sick to my stomach. However, it's not something, we've experienced this in the past. And the conversations that I have with my boys is totally different than my white counterparts. We start our kids out very early, telling them this is how you need to act, in public. This is, if you're put in a situation, where this happens or X, Y, and Z happens, you go through the routine. They have the checklist. And in particular, when it comes to dealing with police officers. So we have those conversations. The expectations, our kids aren't allowed just sometimes to just be kids. The expectations are set high because you have to basically let them know that, you can't, when you walk into a place, especially when they get to that age when they're 14, 15, 16, and they're kind of awkward and they're growing and they're tall and they're intimidating, they saw the change when they were growing up, how people just responded to them differently. And you have to talk to them about that so they know where that's coming from.
Are you still doing it, Terry, even though they're in their 20s, or do you believe that they got the message earlier?
I think they have the message, but as a mother, you still reinforce.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Bill, do you have children?
I have children, yes. I have two girls and a boy. The boy is the youngest. He's 38 now, so they're older now. But my son, for many years, rode around with a tape recorder in his car. If he was ever stopped by the police, he would start the tape immediately because he didn't trust that the interaction would go exactly as he thought it would or should, and wanted to make sure he could document exactly what happened. Again, this was a son who was never in trouble, never arrested, college student, whole 9 yards there. But still, he had to protect himself, quote unquote, from the unfortunate situation that might happen.
Bill, what would a policy look like that gave guidance to your employees when clearly there was a policy that people could not come in, use Starbucks unless they were customers? I imagine that their intent was having tables be available for paying customers. How do you find the balance between what seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable policy and implementing it sensitively in this environment? And then the police obviously have a policy that says owners have a right to call them if customers are not being responsive to the policy. There are three things going on here: the policy of the store, the people who came in as customers, and the police response to that. That seems to me to be a lot of gray. How do you help people through these gray situations?
Well, Starbucks, like a lot of stores today, they have a very lenient policy when it comes to people sitting in the restaurant. People come there, they'll get a cup of coffee, they'll sit, they'll have meetings, they'll get on their phone, their computer. They will do all kinds of things in terms of kind of taking an email, having long conversations, whatever they want to do. But in this case, I think the server may have mistaking this individual for someone other than someone who would have been a paying customer. Two young black males. She may have equated them with homeless people coming into the store, which may have been an issue. They come in, they sit there, they want to use the bathroom, they don't buy anything. You want to get them out at some point to make sure that that's not part of your culture in the store. So I'm thinking that in her mind, she went to that. Her biases pushed her in that direction. And so she reacted out of bias as opposed to out of logic. Logically, they didn't look like homeless people. Rarely do you see two homeless men walking together. They're always one by one. So logic would tell you, no, they're not homeless. But bias always overrides logic. And so her biases that she was holding on to overrode the logic of, hey, these guys sitting here, they're not causing any problem. They say they have a meeting coming up, which they did. Let them sit.
And Terry, what about the police end of the gray? They're being called into a situation. The manager has said these folks are violating our store policy. How might they have looked at the situation differently?
Well, I would like Lynn to respond to that because Lynn is the attorney and she
Lynn.
has.
Yeah, we have you on now.
Yes, she is. Yeah, when it comes to policy, she is the person.
Welcome. Did you hear?
I think the fundamental issue here, whether you call it implicit bias or stereotyping, is that people, and I'm Caucasian, so I have to say it's mostly our problem, that they have a stereotype of people of color, whether it's African American, Latino, Muslim, anybody that's different than white American, what we think of as white Americans in the 1950s. And the problem is getting people to see other people as human beings rather than as a stereotype. And I think it's really, really hard to do. And that's why we have laws, that's why we have policies, because those are supposed to sort of cut through the prejudice and bias that I think most people in this country have. And so the way it's supposed to work, but doesn't work so well these days, is that the laws will prohibit discrimination. So they override the biases. The policy should override the natural biases of the server, say, this young woman, and force them to do the right thing. And I think the fundamental problem in Starbucks is this woman saw two black men and she thought they were dangerous. Mm-hmm. And there was no evidence of that. Absolutely none. They were behaving just like all the other patrons of Starbucks did. But in her mind, because they were African American, they were young, they were dangerous, and that's why I believe she called the police. So overriding that bias, because we're not going to unroot it immediately, is you have to have policies, you have to have laws, you do have to have training, but training isn't the end all and be all. I think we also have to have a campaign on the national level, and I think with this administration, which has exhibited bias in so many ways, that's sort of given permission to people who have, implicit bias and see people of color in different ways, that gives them permission to act on that. And I think personally, and we've written this in briefs on the Muslim ban, the travel ban, that it leads to violence. And, the getting ejected from Starbucks is one thing, but getting killed, which I think is also
entirely different.
I think it's a natural result of having the expression by politicians at the national level that bias is okay.
Right.
Well, then at a
we need a law. We need law enforcement, and we also need policies to overcome people's implicit biases, because they're there. They're always going to be there, probably. Right. But this is to sort of overcome that.
Well, then what is unclear to me is the role that the police played. Do they have any discretion in the gray area? Could they have not made that arrest?
Well, I can tell you, in D.C., that arrest would not have been made. It wouldn't have happened because we have a very diverse police force. We didn't always, but we do now. And so I think it's partially community basis. The police felt like they had to respond to some shop owner's call. I think the policemen involved say that was wrong to do. We were wrong. We shouldn't have done it after initially defending the police. But I think it also comes from a police force that has the same implicit biases. And this doesn't depend, unfortunately, on whether you're African American or white. Implicit biases against young black men.
Right.
So I think law enforcement is a big part of the problem.
Right. Since the bias and stereotypes and overt prejudice towards African Americans and blacks is so obvious in the society, can either of you or any of you speak to the notion that people of color also have biases that they display with other people of color? Can you speak to that so we don't get a sense that this is just a black-white dynamic? Bill?
It is not just black and white. When you think about diversity, diversity is all the ways which we are different one from the other. So it's more than just race and gender, it's all the other things as well. You think about sexual orientation, you think about issues of religion and so forth. All those issues are issues where we can and oftentimes do hold biases. We are socialized, and you think about the socialization that we go through from our television, from our communities, from our family, and sometimes that socialization gives us biases against women, against minorities, whatever the case may be. It's not a black and white issue, it's a human issue. If you were born and raised and lived on this planet, you have biases. You will have them until you work consciously to eradicate them. And part of that work really is getting to know people beyond the stereotypes. If we're not digging that deep to get beyond the stereotypes, we're going to have those biases until we die.
Terry, are you still with us? Thank you, Bill. Terry,
Yes.
are you still with us?
I am still with you, and I totally agree with Bill. I think that socially and economically, sometimes that's how your biases are formed. Sometimes it also could be from a negative experience that you've had in the past, and that you haven't had the opportunity to work through it or change your opinion about something. But I think in general, the social economic piece of it creates and is the root of a lot of biases.
Thank you. Lynn, can I throw one more question to you?
Sure.
The notion of bias, I think we understand, at least the people here. What is there a solution where I may never change my bias? I may never feel totally warm or safe or inclusive of a group of people, but I'm at work, so I have to change my behavior, where I can be behavior focused rather than intrapersonally focused?
Exactly. I think the answer is yes. I think that's why we have employment discrimination laws, because no one is saying you have to socialize with people that are different in your house, but in the workplace you do have to treat everybody with equal respect. There have to be equal opportunities, and I think it's a great opportunity for those people who have biases to mix with people of different races or people that are different than them that they won't see in their communities or in their social groups. And I think, if enforced, one of the geniuses of the employment laws is it forces people to work together. And when you work together, you see people as people. They're not stereotypes. They're not the people you see on TV necessarily.
Right.
And so I think we don't have a lot of it now, but further enforcement of the employment laws by the government and then also by the private bar, which is the kind of work I do, is gonna lead to naturally to an increase in respect and equality.
Thank you, Lynn. All three of you get a vote before we leave. Bill, given the response by Starbucks leadership to close the stores for a day, 8,000 stores, as I understand it, for training, boycott or no boycott?
My vote is no boycott. They're doing all the right thing. This is one individual. In years past, this one server, what she did would have been a local incident, may have got a little bit of press locally, but things have changed. The paradigm around issues of diversity have changed. There's a much lower level of tolerance for intolerance today. And companies, organizations understand that is reality. It's not going to change. So Starbucks got caught up into this new reality, this new paradigm we have. But it's a good company. They're doing the right thing. They're responding properly. They made it very clear the training is the first step, not the last. I think they're getting it all right. And so I'm going to side with them and say, no, let's not boycott them. Let's see how they respond long term and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you. Thank you. Terry, boycott, no boycott?
No boycott. I think given that they closed 8,000 stores to have this training, that they are serious about it, because their retail operation and the bottom line, the amount of revenue that they are going to lose just for that day is unbelievable. And I think it speaks volumes. And I think it just shows that they're very serious about it.
Thank you. Lynn, boycott, no boycott?
Well, I think the boycott may have brought Starbucks to the idea that training and shutting their stores was a good thing. So I think it served its purpose. I think continuing to push Starbucks and a lot of other retail establishments to take this issue seriously could make a big difference in a lot of communities, because it's not just Starbucks, it's all over. And so I think this is a great example of what, a terrible incident for these young men, but it generated a national conversation, and I think Starbucks now is doing the right thing.
Right. And from a policy perspective, don't they need to reinforce this more strongly in their onboarding and orientation process? Because as I remember, retail turnover is 54, 55%. So many of the people who work there may not be there 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
Yeah. Well, it's also that, the young woman who was a barista, I guess, who created this issue, it's not just low-wage workers we have to look at. We have to look throughout the economic spectrum all the way to the top, because in some ways people at the top are worse in terms of discrimination than the people at the bottom who are just trying to survive. So I think we have to see this as a continuing struggle and a continuing education for people.
Okay, thank you. Bill, did you look like you had one final word? Okay, this was fantastic. I could have stayed here all day and listened to this wonderful expert advice. We will do this again. Lynn, Terry, Bill, thank you so much. And thanks to HR Source for sponsoring this. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.